So this is today, the 119th Security Thought Leadership webinar. And we've been here throughout the pandemic, each week, usually at this time on a Tuesday and a Thursday, examining some aspect of security sector in order that we can critique today so we get a better type of security tomorrow. That's the idea of thought leadership, not to try and solve the world's problems, but to try and introduce ideas and thinking that will enable us to interpret it in a meaningful way going forward. And today's topic is one that has emerged from previous webinars, as indeed they all do these days. It's about security manufacturing, the signals to a changing security landscape. And this came about, for some of you may recall, a conversation on a previous thought leadership webinar, when we were looking at what's going to happen in the future, and the discussion got around to, if you really want to know what's going to happen in the future, ask manufacturers, because their lives depends on getting it right. Because it's one thing to buy a sale and return basis. It's quite a different when you've got to pay for manufacturing and keep it regardless. So it's been on the agenda for a while. And today we're going to examine this with two panelists from different parts of the world who are coming at this from very different angles. So in a second, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce them both, and then I'm going to invite each of them to make an opening statement. That's 3 minutes when they get the opportunity to say whatever they want to say about this subject matter. And then we'll have a discussion, and you're very welcome to join that. If you'd like to join on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, get a question in. We'll endeavour to incorporate it in the ensuing discussion. So without further ado then, let's go and meet our panellists. And first of all, from the UK, Simon, please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Simon Cham. I work with a company called Warrior Doors, and we manufacture security doors and windows here in the UK.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And over to the Netherlands, and let's meet Jasper. Jasper.
Yes, thank you, Martin. My name is Jasper Wyman, CEO of BAVAC Security Group, and we produce security products like speed gates and hostile vehicle mitigation products.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Well, looking forward to the discussion. So what we're going to do without further ado is, for all of those who've been here before and know how it works, we'll ask each of our panelists to make an opening statement, 3 minutes, when they can say what they want to about the subject matter. So without further ado then, Simon, your opening statement, please.
Excellent, thanks. Obviously, different companies have been affected in different ways, and I think that the supply chains have definitely been sort of affected. So delays to parts, delays to materials. A lot of companies have even had to face shutdowns where basically all work has stopped, where no work has been done whatsoever. No supplies have been able to go out, so that's had a knock-on effect to people who supply to you. There's been no customers. There's been an absolutely ground to a halt sort of status. You've had companies who have had people on furlough. We've certainly had people on furlough. And unfortunately for the staff members, they've had to ask themselves the questions of, well, can I actually still survive? Can I still sort of maintain the level of living that I have on a lesser wages? Now, here in the UK, that was about 80% of wages for the furlough, and around the world, it would have been a different percentage, but it would have been a lesser amount than they were used to. And we've seen that people have made a decision that they're not able to cope, and they've left. So it could be that some companies have lost some key sort of people that their business has been structured around. It could be that some skills have had to go elsewhere, or even people have just retrained and gone out of the business entirely. And now, once we come to the end and we're coming to the part where we're sort of starting to open up again, I think we've got a different style of problem, in as much as we're having to dig out people who have become very used to working from home. They've got very used to the fact that maybe they are earning less wages, but they've still been able to manage, and they've found other things to do with their time. And now we're saying to them, right, it's okay for you now to come back to work. And the danger and the difficulty there, of course, is that some people are finding it really difficult to sort of break that habit that has been entrenched for maybe a year or more. Obviously, some of the new sort of opportunities, some companies have found themselves more able to be nimble than their competition. So some of their competition perhaps haven't been able to respond to the challenges as others. Those that have been able to maintain their supply. I mean, I know that us as a company, we've managed to do a lot of our stuff in-house. So, you know, we don't actually outsource a lot of our stuff, and we can actually do it all ourselves under one roof in the same factory. So that's been really good for us. Crime trends have changed, certainly from us, from a security perspective. So it's actually opened up new avenues for us to explore. So one of the avenues that opened up was through the wall burglary. So with all the businesses being shut down or more vacant properties being out there, unfortunately, some businesses going out of business. So there've been vacant premises out there, and the criminals have seen an opportunity and utilised those empty properties to break through into existing companies, and that's obviously opened up a new market for us in terms of target hardening and stuff like that. But there was other opportunities, like you've got a Kickstart scheme where you can take on graduates and apprenticeships from the government, and I guess it's about facing the future. Some of the things that we've adopted as part of the restrictions, like masks and hand gel, there's actually been built in, if you like, as part of best practice. So going forward, some of these things might actually stay in place.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. Really interesting, actually. I didn't know about that burglaries, about empty buildings being used to break in. Very, very interesting. Okay, thank you very much indeed. We'll come back to that, I'm sure, in a minute. If the audience should like to get your questions in using the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen, we'll endeavour to incorporate it in the ensuing discussion. But first of all, let's hear our opening statement from Jasper. Jasper, your opening statement, please.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Our security world is changing and has been changing over the last years, 1.5 years, but actually not due to COVID at all. Our activities were deemed vital for critical infrastructure for government buildings, buildings like prisons, embassies, and whatever pandemic there's going on in the world. If the main gate of a prison is broken, it needs to be fixed, and a new one needs to be supplied. So also our activities in war zones of protecting military bases, they just continued. Another thing continued, actually indirect because of COVID, is a growth in supply chain, the growth in warehouses, demand for warehouses and data centers. So we have seen a lot of business, and unfortunately for a lot of other companies who have been affected by COVID, we had a record-breaking year last year in terms of our business. At the same time, I mentioned change. The biggest change is not due to COVID, but due to this change in landscape. We produce security products, but you see a shift towards system integration activities where at the end of the day, we will still continue to produce physical products like speed gates. However, more and more you see the threats are changing from hard threats into soft threats, and it's more data that is driving the business rather than big gates and locks and steel barriers.
Jasper, thank you very much indeed. Interesting point. Well, let me come to that point, Jasper, if I might first, because it strikes me as a really sort of key issue. And this is this point about the drive online and the drive to integration. And I wonder to what extent, presumably, Jasper, that is predictable. You can get yourself ready and you can be at the forefront. Or is it a bit more complicated than that?
There's a timing issue to that. If you look at 3 key technologies that impact our business heavily, one is Internet of Things. It's the connectivity of things. Everything is connected nowadays, whether it's a gate or a lock or a camera or a sensor. That is today's issue. That's not only predictable, that's just going on at the moment. The second one is today and a little bit into tomorrow, that is machine learning. So it's very smart algorithms that can do the job a lot better than humans do. They don't get tired, they're always spot on. And these algorithms, they get it very strong in terms of anomaly detection. What is a threat and what is not? So very strong algorithms. And really predictability into the future is the usage of distributed ledger technology. So the kind of the blockchain technology that impacts our business, but that's more tomorrow and the day after. So that to give you a flavor of where we are in timing and the predictability on when that kind of technology is kicking in.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I mean, Simon, you made an interesting point that you're relatively new to the world of to the world. You've previously got a background in policing, public sector to commercial sector. I wonder whether I can ask you two questions here. One is, how did you find the commercial sector? Two, how have you found manufacturing? So or maybe you could do them together. Your thoughts?
It's quite a shift change, actually. I mean, obviously, after doing 30 years in the police, I guess in some respects you become institutionalized. And I guess whilst you're in the public sector, everybody moans about how the public sector works and how perhaps the commercial world actually works better. And it's been quite an eye opener, actually, moving into the commercial world. I mean, towards my latter years in the job, I was butting up, if you like, against commercial entities and had a bit more of awareness of it. But having moved across, it's still quite an eye opener. And manufacturing, yes, it's definitely been a wake-up call for me. I think another failing or another mistake that a lot of people make in public services is you get to a certain level or a certain degree of knowledge within public services, and you think you feel as though you know it all, or you feel as though you're at the pinnacle of your career. And all of a sudden, I've come into manufacturing, and there's an awful lot of stuff that you don't cover in the public services world because it's all cut out. So the granular detail within the commercial world and manufacturing in particular has been a real wake-up call for me.
And what about the focus on the bottom line? We hear so much about that. Was that difficult to get to grips with, Simon? Maybe in the police, it's about what's right and wrong, and in the commercial sector, much more about what's commercially viable as well as what's right and wrong.
It is. I mean, I'm quite fortunate because the company I work for doesn't seem to take that view, which is very pleasing. And there are plenty of companies out there that don't, and they take a similar view. Obviously, they have to make a profit, but they do take a similar view along the lines of we're only going to sell you our product if it's going to be fit for purpose. If it's not going to be fit for purpose, then we're not going to sell it to you. I mean, ultimately, we have a 100% record. We've never had a door ripped out or broken into, and so that is a very important thing for us. So if we think that somebody it just wants to buy a door and stick it in somewhere that we think is inappropriate, we will say no. So that's quite refreshing. I'll tell you what I do miss from the public services, and that's being able to phone people up and say, can I come and see this, or can I come and see that? And as a public servant, certainly within the police, they would say yes. Now, of course, because I work for a commercial entity, they're like, well, that's going to give you a commercial advantage, so maybe you can't come. So I'm missing out on that, and a big deal.
Well, it's an interesting point. And of course, in a previous webinar, we've looked at the relationship between the public and private sector, and that issue has cropped up. It's the theory's easy, the practice is somewhat different. Okay, let's go to our questions. Just, I'm going to come to you first, if I might. And Mark Rowe is a very well-known journalist in the United Kingdom. He works for one of the big magazines. And his question is, because of social distancing, is it harder to get feedback from customers? And indeed, I wonder whether I can answer you, Jasper, is about, we hear a lot in the commercial sector about staying close to customers, staying close to the people buying what you're giving them so you know the changes. To what extent has that process been complicated or made easier by the experience of the last 15 months or so? Jasper first, and I'll come to you, Simon.
Certainly made it somewhat more complex. However, the whole transition into the digital world we have made as a company already 3.5 years ago. And because of that, it was quite an easy change from the physical meetings to Teams session and Teams meetings. It took us a week to get it, just to see what is going on in the world here. How do we react? What is going on? How do we stay healthy? Keep an eye on the people's health, but also on the cash flow and on the business. And after a week, we settled in and thought, okay, well, we have everything in place to ensure continuity. And so we called out to all the customers, got in touch with them, and so moved from physical meetings to Teams meetings. And frankly, I have to say, in some cases, we had more frequent contact with our customers and partners due to team sessions than we had with face-to-face meetings. So to a certain extent, it actually increased the level of contacts with our partners and clients.
Now, to such an extent that you would maintain that going forward? I mean, because a lot of the people have been saying, Jasper, that yes, it's good, but you definitely lose in the long run if you just stick to Teams.
Absolutely. Yeah, you missed a hugging factor. So
Right.
at the end of the day, you want to have, look each other in the eye and have a cup of coffee together and have a sensible discussion. I think in the future, it will more be a hybrid model. I think to a large extent, the remote working and the team sessions and Zoom, etc., will be there to stay. However, it will be in combination with face-to-face meetings.
And do you think, Jasper, from your point of view, the whole point about this experience, are you confident that you haven't lost in terms of understanding of clients' needs and understanding of the market by the pandemic? I mean, have you been able to compensate through Teams, through virtual meetings ably?
Yes, we do. I'm confident about that. And we are in a fortunate position because our business continued. And I feel sorry for a lot of people in the entertainment business, in the restaurant business, etc., who, and here we are in the tulip capital here in the Netherlands. So all the tulip farmers around us here, they had a rough time, and so they lost millions and millions of euros. But in our case, our business continued. That's why I'm confident to say, yes, we kept in touch properly with our customers and partners.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. So I'm going to come to you, because one of the things you mentioned rather interestingly in your opening statement was that you manufacture internally. And I would imagine, and we've heard this in other cases, that social distancing in those contexts became a bit more troublesome. Was it difficult to do so?
I think to change from normal practices to something where you're actually thinking about social distancing, then yes. But in actual fact, no, in another way, because the way that we sort of manufacture our stuff is on an assembly line. So it moves from one stage to another, to another, to another. So in that regard, no. I think the transition from one where we didn't have to think about it to one where we did was, but I think moving forward, we're probably going to retain some of the things that have come in as sort of best practice anyway. So for us, no.
Interesting. And in terms of where Mark Rowe's question was about whether the need to social distance had in any way distanced you from customers and what they're looking for. Are you, presumably you use Teams or virtual meetings too, equally as good and able you to find out just as well what customers want?
Yes and no. I mean, I think I agree with Jasper. It's certainly moving forward, there will be a hybrid of both. I don't think you can ever get away from the face-to-face meeting. I mean, we're physical installers, so we have to go to site and we have to install our stuff. So at some point, we have to meet a customer on site to actually install our equipment. But I think what you miss out on in Teams, whilst in a lot of respects, Teams and virtual meetings can be efficient. In the efficiency, making it so efficient, you miss out on the accidental stuff that you come across. So the accidental comment, or everyone's taking their time, and even on this webinar, we're taking our time and we're thinking about what we're saying. And it's the odd chat where you're in a room and someone makes a comment and you pick up on the comment that you overheard, or you're just filling up with coffee, and it's those comments and those sort of interactions that you miss out on. So I don't think you can, and they can be vital, because people will say things in those instances that they won't say in an open forum like this. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Thank you very much indeed. Let's move on, Jasper, back to you if I might. A question from Mike. And it's a good question, actually, that Jasper, because I'd be interested to get how you've balanced this. And it's about the balance between developing products which customers are asking for today and those which you see as the future of technology. I'm conscious of a quote by Henry Ford, who said, "Had I given the customers what they wanted, I would have given them faster horses." And it's sort of an interesting point about how you balance those two. I'm interested anyway. Perhaps a follow-up is whether it's any more difficult or you've had to change things because of recent events.
Yeah, well, that's part of my job, is driving the innovation agenda. You have to stay on top of it and stay in front of the market. Yes, you develop today what the customers are asking, but in the meantime, you continue to develop new concepts about the world of tomorrow. Because if you don't do that, for example, in our speed gates business, they're all made of steel, hardened steel today. Well, if we continue to do that, while the market is moving to carbon fiber, to give a random example, then we're stuck with a metal factory. That's why, as much as possible, we keep the company really engineering focused and outsource the activities like the steel production to another company, because then we have the flexibility to move to a different technology tomorrow if we think that that is the best solution, or we think that the market is moving in that direction.
Yeah, interesting. And is just for example, is the competition intense? For example, from carbon fiber you mentioned there. I would imagine that you wouldn't be alone in wanting to get into that world or use that product. Is the competition intense for that?
Partly. You see a lot of competition who actually chose to do the manufacturing themselves. So they are bound to fill their factory with steel products because that's their factory. In our case, we have outsourced that particular part of the process. So we own the IPR and we own the engineering. However, that final part of core production, we outsource to another company. And if we want to do it steel today and plastic tomorrow, we can change, and we don't have to stick to a particular factory that we have. So it's all about people. It's about the brains, not about machines.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so Simon, let me put that to you. I mean, because of course you haven't got that privilege. I mean, one of the things is of manufacturing internally. That's a bigger decision for you.
Well, I think we've identified over the years that steel is our, if you like, our USP. It's our unique selling point, and we've gone with steel because we think it's the best material for doors, way and above other materials that there are for doors. And I can't speak about speed gates because we don't do speed gates. But I think if we were to give the people or the customers, if you like, what they were asking for, then the issue for me is around the connectivity. Now, that is the way to go. That does seem to be the way that the wave of pressure, if you like, is going. It's about connecting everything into one thing. I think we might be a bit old-fashioned about that, and certainly I think more old-fashioned about that. For me, it still needs physical locks and stuff. The interconnectivity and the degree that everyone is going interconnected just sort of scares me a little bit. I think there's a lot of risk around that, and I think that's something that I sort of personally shy away from. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Well, thank you very much indeed. Let me move on. I'll come back to you, Jasper, if I might. Rachel Lawyer is previously a panelist on this. She's also an author who's written the book. Actually, you mentioned, Jasper, about integration. Her and Brian Allen have written one of the big books that incorporates that dimension. And her point is about what you see as the future state of security jobs to be done in this new world. Working from home, and all that goes with that. Presumably in manufacturing, you can't have that. How are manufacturers adapting to this changing world of work? And do you think that manufacturers are able to do it quickly enough to keep up with what other worlds are doing? Well, to start with the last one, you have to. Either way, you either adapt or you die. So there's hardly anything in between. But to the first question, actually, there are two parts to it. First of all, when the pandemic broke out, we have to turn overnight into a crisis mode, which means the production process, the implementation and the realization of our projects, we, in the majority of them, we turned them into a 2-shift operation. So from 6 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon and 2:30 to 10 p.m., which means if we would have, a pandemic spread within that part of the factory process, we would put an entire shift of production into quarantine and continue the business with the other half. So that was one crisis measure that helped us, to mitigate the risk of the pandemic. And secondly, so our companies, our production companies, changing fast enough
Yes, I think so. Maybe due to COVID, maybe not, but I think the majority of the business is changing fast enough. However, it's a changing landscape. So also, like Simon is mentioning, the connectivity, the cyber component to every bit of business that we do is increasing. And what you see in terms of new recruits, new hires that we do are much more in the software space, in the cyberspace, in system integration, than in pure engineering or production related items.
Yeah, I mean, just to make sure I do justice to Rachel's point. So tell me this: are you is getting labour a problem? We've been hearing in certain sectors this has been a massive issue. In fact, it cropped up on the last webinar actually, where there was some serious concern. It was on the national news in the UK today, in fact, Jasper. From your point of view, do you sense you're going to find problems with getting with labour supply, or should
actually
okay?
In the Netherlands, of course, it varies from country to country. Yeah. In the Netherlands and also in the US, not so much. For us, the increase in steel price is a bigger issue.
Okay. Okay. And so prices go up and that's that, or what? Yeah,
they go up dramatically. The steel price is going up dramatically. And that's a challenge because you can only increase so much towards the customer. And the steel price at the moment is increasing almost faster that we can integrate and we can build into our offers to the market.
Okay. Just you know, the idea that you had of 2 shifts that you mentioned, was that difficult to implement or fairly straightforward? I'm just thinking it's a disruption to people's lives on the one hand, but it's a disruptive exercise anyway.
At the moment, of course, when the pandemic broke out, everyone knew that everyone realized they had to do something and step up to the plate and to do something special. So there was not so much of a big issue. Frankly, people were quite glad that they still had a job.
And will you retain any of that when we get to the new normal, or are you back to the way you were on that one?
Yeah, back to the way we were.
Okay,
yeah, because at the moment, with all the vaccination going on, there's no need for double shifts anymore.
Was it more expensive a double shift then, or not?
Somewhat.
Okay.
Not so much. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Simon. So same question to you. It's about the impact of the pandemic on job roles and the shift to different ways of working. Has that had an impact on you in any way, Simon? And is it likely to have going forward?
I think going forward, I think some of the things that, some of the ways that it's impacted us will probably be sort of retained, and we'll probably take that moving forward. I guess the benefit that we have over perhaps an organisation that it sounds like Jasper works for sort of a multinational company. Some of our competitors have much more sort of bigger workforces, bigger factories, and we're a bit more nimble. As a family-owned company, I guess it's a bit more manageable and a bit more able to cope with any challenges. In terms of recruiting staff, I don't believe that's affected us at all. We've taken on a number of new staff, and so that hasn't really affected us. I guess it depends on size, and certainly one of our benefits has always been the fact that we're able to be a bit more nimble than some of the other factories. So some of the other factories, if they get an extra piece of work, it can almost be a negative for them because all of a sudden they've got to squeeze it in. Whereas for us, it's a lot more. It's just a lot easier. It's not because we're quiet. It's just that we have less to sort of contend with. So I guess as a smaller enterprise and a more nimble enterprise, that's almost our benefit within the marketplace.
I suppose the point is, as a manufacturer, though, Simon, you've got to have people in the work in work physically there, haven't you? I assume those who are doing the manufacturing have physically got to be there to manufacture. So, did you have to make any radical changes to the way that was done?
I think the only real radical change to us was that when there was a complete shutdown. So obviously there was no work whatsoever. But outside of that, when there were restrictions or now that we're opening up, it's almost been business as usual. I mean, we've done likewise where we've had a bit of a shifting. So we've thought about when staff are needed to come in and how many staff are on site and stuff like that. but I guess the numbers are much smaller. So I guess with a smaller number, it's easier to manage than with a huge number. If you've got huge number, I mean, you can imagine a car factory like Ford, for example, and they must have thousands of people on a production line in one space, albeit a big space. But we don't have that issue. We're a much smaller space and a much smaller number of people. So for us, it was a lot better, a lot easier for us to manage.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to come to you first on this one, Simon, because it builds on something you said. So Dr. Glenn Kitteringham, who's previously been a panelist on this webinar, has got a question. Before I ask you this question, I just want to tell you a little story. Going back about 15 years, I was giving a talk at one security event. Of course, I do a lot of these, or did do a lot of them. And I was giving a talk about the role of the security sector. And this chap came up to me afterwards and he said to me, Martin, I think what you said was very naive. And I said, why is that? And he said, let me tell you why. Because I am a very, very good alarm installer. He said, and when I go to a client, I give them the best advice I believe I can give them about installing alarm. But if I go to a client and I think to myself, they really need a big fence rather than an alarm, do you think I'm going to tell them that? Or do you think I'm going to try and sell them the best alarm that I can? Now, the reason I only say that is because in the previous webinars, we've had this conversation about the reliability of the commercial sector to give advice in the interest of the client rather than advice. And Simon, you mentioned that you've gone from that public sector to private sector role, where sometimes this conflict manifests itself in most abruptly or most clearly. And Glenn's question is about to what extent manufacturers, but we could read the commercial sector, who have got to sell things to survive, can become a good reference point for what's best for the customer. So if something I could come to you and then Jasper about the ways of managing that bit. Of course, on one level, one would think that if you start giving bad advice and selling the wrong things, you're soon going to get caught out and it's all going to come tumbling down. But your thoughts, Simon?
Well, as I said earlier, I mean, as a company, we've got a reputation and we're very proud of that reputation. So we wouldn't want to put our product in somewhere where there's a potential that it might fail. So we certainly would not sell something where we don't think it's going to be suitable. So we set our own standards, if you like, and our own standards could arguably, depends who you speak to, be higher than most people's. I mean, I do still have my public service head on. It's quite frustrating. I mean, I did say before I took on the job to the boss, I said, what if I go along and I think that something else, they need fog, or they need an alarm, they need a bigger fence, and we don't sell those. What if I think that? And he said, Simon, if that's what you think, then tell them that, which is one of the reasons why I went with the company. So there are other companies, there are lots of companies out there, but I think it's a question of finding those companies that take that view. And the difficulty that the customer will have will be picking through the minefield of the massive companies out there, because there will be companies out there who will simply sell you what they sell, and they'll just say that's what they do.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, Jeff, if I could come to you on this, just we've heard a bit in previous seminars about the process of selling being about the process of building up a rapport, being in partnership, understanding your client's needs, getting credibility for giving good advice, the product being successful and coming back for more. And I get all that and I understand all that. But we've also heard about you don't have to be, that's a very credible way to behave. Is there a danger, does it ever happen in manufacturing, in being like that, you can lose out to the non-credible because they can sound just as convincing?
Yes, there's a risk, but that's a risk I'm gladly to take.
Yeah.
Because this is all about integrity, reputation, and it's about long-term relationships. And you can lose them overnight if you try to cheat your way into a deal. It's not about the deal, it's about the relationship. Our company is in business for 45 years and we tend to stay in business for another 45.
Yeah, I mean, on the very last webinar, actually, Jasper, what Peter, one of the panelists from the man guarding sector, was saying one of the great problems of COVID is it's generated lots of companies supplying personnel who are not credible, who are undermining credible suppliers, and because the barriers to entry are so slight, it's easy to do that. And he was just calling on regulators to get a grip. You know, something illegal about it, but in this country at least, but it is undermining. I suppose in your world, it's a lot more difficult to do that. The barriers to entry are far greater, aren't they?
It is, because it's also a lot about certification. So things like crash rating and resistancy classes, that's all highly regulated. And this is not, you need to have a proper company to build up that credibility, to get your certifications in place in order to allow to work at that level and to provide the kind of product that have the higher standards.
Yeah, and I expected you to say that, to be honest, and it strikes me as what people are saying. Simon, you were just nodding your head on that. So have you been? Has your view changed, having come from long-standing public service to private service? Has your view changed positively or negatively about the commercial sector? Now, you did say in your opening statement that it can be chaos too, but there is a sense. Sometimes you can be forgiven for believing the public sector feels it's got a monopoly on ethical behaviour.
I think there's quite a controversial statement there, Martin. But yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think I'm a big believer in standards. I think one of the downsides to standards, certainly when I was looking at safes and the safe industry, they were saying to me, why would we make a safe any better than a standard that exists when no one is asking for it? So they actually build to the standards, which actually isn't doing the customer any favors, because then why would you exceed the standard? Because everyone's happy with the existing standards. What I have noticed when I was in the public sector, I would quite happily go along to somewhere, and all I had on my head was a security head, and I would say, you'd need this, you'd need that, you'd need this standard for this standard for that. I would have no concept about the ramifications thereaafter, how much it costs to maintain, how much it might cost to repair or replace. None of the ancillary stuff that comes on down the line. And the difficulty with standards is it's a test. So it's a brand new product that's put in a lab and tested to, if you like, resistance to 4th entry for that time. Well, that product isn't tested 10 years later. So now I appreciate more about getting the right standard. So I quite often won't actually say a higher standard. I know there is a higher standard, but I will actually recommend a lower standard because I think it's more appropriate for the customer, thinking about things that aren't security related, thinking about things like the cost of repair, the cost of maintenance, and so on.
Yeah, okay. Interesting how we had a webinar a few months ago now about this, people who transition from the public to the private sector, and some of these points were coming out about how people have found it difficult to adjust, but in an interesting position. Jasper, if I can come back to you, and just let me give you a question that I've got just sent in advance. And Jasper, the question is this, that given this changing world for manufacturers, are there headline issues that are facing the security manufacturing sector that are likely to either be drivers of change or serious barriers to progress that need to be managed? I think on a strategic level now, I'm almost a dynamic level, Jasper.
Good questions. I think in general, you have to go back to the reason why are we producing something? And that is because it solves a problem. Now, our world is changing because the threat level is changing. So from physical attacks, you see what is more damaging for a society. And of course, it's a big tragedy if you have a car bomb in a group of people. However, at the end of the day, the impact on a society of softer attacks like cyber attack or undermining or influencing, like influencing an election, has a bigger impact than a car bomb. Having said that, does that prevent us from building speed gates? No, but overnight it will not change, but in due time you will see that next to physical barriers and electronic means, you see a shift that things like cybersecurity and more cyber resilience, companies and organizations and governments, is getting more important. That does not take away that they still need physical barriers, but it's a change in shift.
Yeah, and you did allude to this in your opening statement as well. And just but on this point, is that I just on the abstract, you would think that if you're manufacturing a physical product and now you've got to get into this world of software, there is a dynamic change or a sea change in focus and skill sets and expertise. Is that correct? And how do you manage it? Or am I being too dramatic here?
No, it's correct. And we've seen that reflected in the type of people that we hire. Just an example, last month, we hired 14 new people. The majority of those, they have a network engineering background. So no mechanical design background, so that's different. So you see the nature of companies are shifting because the world is shifting.
And was it difficult to get those people, Jasper, or not?
Fairly difficult. There's a high demand for cybersecurity experts.
Yeah, this is what we're being told. This is this echoes.
It's not easy.
No.
It's not easy. However, the fact that we do quite exciting stuff for defense and working in war zones and doing exciting stuff all around the world, that's our differentiator.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know something interesting? We do a research survey every year called under the Security Research Initiative, and last year we did it on careers in security. And interestingly, just for one of the main reasons that people like being in security, it's interesting, it's varied, it's exciting. You know, it's an interesting world, not one that the security sector is very good at selling, but nevertheless an interesting point that you make, echoing that thought. So I'm going to come to you with a final comment, running out of time. Just that same point about dynamic changes on the horizon that can either provide an impetus for change in security manufacturing or a barrier to progress.
I think for me, the interconnectivity and connecting things to, if you like, the internet, or just connecting things generally, we see it as a risk, if you like, as a danger, as a threat, if you like, to our physical security. So we're perfectly happy with our physical security, and we're perfectly happy with what we can provide and what we can do and the way that we can achieve it. And I guess we see other people, if you like, connecting to us as the risk, and that's a loss of control to someone else. And I think we're unwilling to give up that control, and we would rather, again, perhaps because of our reputation, we would rather sort of walk away from that. If someone is insisting that they connect a weakness to our system, we would rather walk away from it, because it can sort of defeat what we know will work. And for us, it's all about protecting people. People is always better than stuff. I mean, you can use millions, hundreds of millions. I mean, even when I was in the police, I was involved in hundreds of millions of frauds and stuff like that. And it is a lot of money. But I guess with something like that kind of attack, there is an audit trail, and eventually you will track down their money. You will track down, some of, if not all of, the perpetrators. And I guess you'll learn from that. And I guess you will then build in and improve your systems. The trouble is that this interconnectivity is still new. And I guess the reason why there's such interest and keenness to get into this area is because there is such scope. Because I guess there is a lack of knowledge or a lack of understanding of what we're trying to achieve. For us, it's about physical security to protect people. And I guess, with this new emerging connectivity, it's a new world. And I guess you've got that new world feeling about it.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, look, Simon, Jasper, thank you very much indeed for your insight. I thoroughly enjoyed that, actually, I have to say. I always enjoy the webinars. I always enjoy the insights. Thank you very much indeed. We're definitely going to be returning to this one in due course, and I look forward to that. Just a few final comments, if I might, from me, just to say to you that the OSPAs are open in the Kenya, Romania, in Benelux. Actually, they're sponsored by Bavak here. So thank you for Jasper for that. In the US and Germany, the OSPAs are open, sponsored by Team Software there. So do get your entries in those countries. And the Tackling Economic Crime Awards, they're open in the UK. Get your entries in. And the cyber OSPAs cropped up. Both panelists mentioned this today. Cybersecurity, a big issue, a worldwide cyber OSPAs. They're the categories. All those worldwide associations involved. More coming on board as we speak. do get your entries in for the Cyber Oscars. Really, really important initiative that, and we're delighted to be bringing it to you. Also to let you know that we're back on Thursday. Now, a bit of a difference on Thursday. The 120th Thought Leadership webinar is taking place at 10 a.m. There is a webinar. We have a new normal, but do we have a new security to match? But it's followed by the South Africa Oscars. We're going to present the awards, the South Africa Oscars. So do join us 10 a.m. on Thursday morning, BST, 10 a.m. BST, where we'll be having a webinar about a webinar first, Thought Leadership webinar, and then we're going to present the Oscars to South Africa. So do join us there. Thank you very much indeed to Simon and to Jasper. Thank you very much to the audience for questions. I very much hope that you'll be with us on Thursday. Until then, wherever you are in the world, stay safe.